So, what do we have here? A movie about a hypothetical second American Civil War? Well, this seems ripe for the typical hyperpartisan ribbing that you'd expect from this kind of story, right? Well, I have some news for you.
We stand now on the precipice of civil war.
Alright, let's make this quick. I have to get back to working on the Age of Extinction video. Before we get started, if you'd like to support me and check out a novel from an indie author, hit the link in the description and take a look at my sci-fi military series Blur Havoc. Or if you'd like, check out my Patreon, Subscribestar, or affiliate links. If anything, a like and subscription are enough. It would be much appreciated. Civil War is a movie that bored me more than any film I've seen in the past 3 years. It is up there with Echo as a piece of media that will cure insomnia. My friends and I discussed it in our group chat and I equated it to the story of Destiny. Destiny 1. All of the interesting shit happens off screen or before the film even started, and you can't help but feel like the lore of the story would have made a better story than the actual story we got. Well, it's got that in common with Age of Extinction. So I'm going to swiftly run through the story and discuss a few points here and there. I'm really not trying to make an hour-long video about this movie because I genuinely think no one cares enough about this movie to watch an hour-long video about it. Our story revolves around Lee, a photojournalist who has seen some heinous shit in several conflicts around the world. She and her two colleagues Joel and Sammy plan to go on a suicidal road trip from New York City to DC to interview the authoritarian president who is set to lose the war in a few days' time. So now we have our goal. While planning this, the world building is killed before the film even gets its stride going. Sammy tells Lee and Joel that it's a suicide mission because the interstate system has essentially been vaporized. Okay, so how the fuck are you guys celebrating with alcohol? Where the hell did Joel get those cigarettes? If it hasn't dawned on you yet, anyone who thinks about this in a logical sequence of events would be able to explain exactly how this would go. Trucks would not be able to make their routes in a timely fashion. Shipments of all kinds would be late. These trucks would have to go onto the back roads where they would more than likely be attacked and looted by raiders and criminals. It would be common knowledge at this point. My guy, no trucks are making it to New York City. Next, the farcical idea that Texas and California would team up to take down the federal government. I know Alex Garland is a Britishman, but come on now. Everyone that knows anything about America knows those two states' governments can't stand the sight of each other. There's also the Florida Alliance, which is more likely to be who Texas buddies up with as it contains Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. California would either be in the Loyalist states or the New People's Army. You may have caught on to the fact that there are 4 factions in this movie. I hope you weren't curious about them because you're only going to be dealing with the Loyalist states and the Western forces. You also don't learn what exactly pushed the states to secede and start the Civil War in the first place. Midwits will say, the president had a 3rd term, and think that is enough to explain how a whole ass war started. Usually wars are started due to multiple factors, tensions rising, deals failing, power struggles, negotiations falling through, etc., etc. But this movie literally starts at the end of said civil war and expects you to give a fuck. In the hotel lobby, Lee speaks with a girl named Jessie, who she saved from an explosion earlier in the day. Jessie looks up to Lee and sees her as a hero. Heroine? Whatever. Long story short, Jessie manages to force her way into the road trip, and we now have our main 4 characters. Lee, the stoic, grizzled veteran, Joel, the wisecracking and easygoing right-hand man, Sammy, the older, wiser, yet less physically capable one, and Jessie, the audience surrogate who's as green as grass. And there it is, what this movie is really going to be. Civil War isn't a war movie until the final 20 minutes or so. This shit is actually a road trip movie. Some have compared this movie to Apocalypse Now as well. All I know is that it gives this film an excuse to have the characters look at destroyed American iconography while unfitting music plays or vaguely patriotic quotes are read. Let's see, hold on, time out for a second. I'm gonna literally show you what 50% of this movie is right now. Watch this.
Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Framing the film like this also keeps the movie's budget low because you will not see much of the war in the supposed Civil War. On the first stop, the gang decides to get gas at a gas station guarded by armed citizens. Lee offers $300 to fill up the truck and 2 canisters. The guy laughs and says that'd get them a ham or cheese sandwich but not gasoline, implying that hyperinflation has occurred. No, not that kind of inflation, you degenerates. While realistic, this causes my mind to go back to that scene at the beginning when the journalists were macking it up in New York. If $300 only gets you a single ham sandwich, how much does this alcohol cost? Could this liquor be acquired on a journalist's salary? At the side of the gas station, Jesse is told by one of the gas station guys that he's tied up a couple of looters. He asks her if he should shoot and kill them, and Jesse freezes. Lee steps in and uses a pattern interrupt to defuse the situation. Jesse made the career decision to be a war journalist, yet can't handle seeing a couple of guys strung up and beaten within an inch of their lives. You don't get to play the "I didn't sign up for this" card. That's like half of your job as a war journalist. Seeing fucked up shit. The other half is taking pictures of said fucked up shit. And this is relatively tame. At the next stop on the road trip, Lee tells Jesse to get her shit together and basically recites what I just said. Jesse asks Lee if she would have taken a picture of Jesse's dead body if the gas station guy shot her. Lee says, "What do you think?" Guess what dramatically ironic moment happens at the end of the movie? The gang decides to park it there and camp for the night, completely unafraid of looters and raiders waking them up at gunpoint to steal all their expensive cameras and shit. In the distance, there seems to be some serious combat happening, and of course, we don't get to see it because this movie's budget was only $50 million, and most of that money was spent on licensed music. But they do decide to check it out in the morning if the fighting is still going on. The next day, there's a scene where some federal troops are fighting some plain-clothed civilians, some of which are wearing Hawaiian shirts, mind you. I wonder why. In the gunfight, Jesse manages to work up the nerve to take pictures of a wounded boog boy as he dies. Yeah, so there's this really weird messaging going on in this movie about journalists. I'll go into more detail later, but for added context, the film starts with a suicide bomber blowing up a bunch of people, and Jesse witnesses Lee taking pictures of the dead bodies before they're even cold. At the gas station, Jesse was so frozen with fear that she was unable to take a picture of the beat-up looters in the gas station car wash. Just remember all of that. Apparently, nobody's taking prisoners because the Boog Boys execute all of the federal soldiers. Why they have such disdain for the feds is never really explained. This is a symptom of a much bigger problem this movie has. So the gang goes to what I'm guessing is a refugee camp, where they eat dinner and spend the night. This was the moment I realized that this movie was not going to show us anything we actually wanted to see in a movie called Civil War. I realized that we were going to see a bunch of scenes of characters hanging out and talking about interesting things that happened off screen, such as this universe's equivalent of the Bite of 87, the Antifa massacre. Yeah, with a name like that, you'd think we'd get more info on it, but nope. The Antifa massacre of 87 is just dropped on you like a sack of loose dog shit, and the movie refuses to elaborate any further on what caused it, what the ramifications of it were, and if it even happened during the war or if it was an event that kickstarted the war. It doesn't even tell you if Antifa was massacred or if they did the massacring. Come the fuck on, bro! So the next day, the gang heads into a town that looks untouched by the war. They enter a shop and the clerk acts as if a civil war isn't happening. She tells them that they simply didn't want to be a part of it, so they chose not to be. While this is admittedly based as fuck, I don't know how that would even work in this scenario. Would the WF, Florida Alliance, or Loyalist government allow this city to not participate in the war? Lee and Jesse bond a bit and the movie doesn't really do a good job of making me care. I honestly started checking Twitter at this point because of how little this movie gives me to work with in terms of investment. Lee gets told by Sammy to look up discreetly and she spots some riflemen on the rooftops guarding the town. I think this is a nod to the rooftop Koreans, which is also a pretty based reference. After that detour, there is a sequence that literally adds nothing to this movie, and it made me visibly throw my hands into the air when it finished. So the gang sees a dead loyalist soldier lying in the street in the middle of some Christmas decorations. His head has an extra hole in it courtesy of a rifle caliber bullet. Joel, instead of backing up and finding another way to go, decides to drive into what is obviously a horrible situation. Surprise, surprise, a sniper takes shots at them and Joel drives them into cover. And what follows is probably the funniest part of the movie. Joel gets out and tries to talk to the sniper guys. Their affiliation is never told to us. We don't know if they're loyalists or WF, and we don't know the faction the shooter in the house is either. Joel keeps asking them questions about a situation they know just as much about, and the spotter finally has enough of Joel's dipshittery and says,
"Oh, I get it. You're retarded. You don't understand a word I say."
The sniper himself, who had his little fingies painted for some reason, tells both of them to shut the fuck up before taking a shot. He then says, "Well, I've got some good news." Then the scene ends. I guess he killed the sniper in the house? What a weird way to end a scene. We're on the road again, and Lee notices that an SUV is aggressively trying to catch up to them. There's this interesting tension where we don't know who these people are or what they want. And just like the characters, a lot of possibilities start to fill your head. Well, unfortunately, it's two friends of the gang. Now all that tension gets released over some bullshit. And all over two guys the movie spawned in as cannon fodder to get fucking killed. After one of the guys in the other SUV named Tony decides to have some fun by climbing in Lee's truck, Jesse, for some reason, decides to live a little, I guess, and climbs over to the other SUV and rides away with some guy she just met. All this nonsense is manufactured in order to put Jesse and the other guy in danger, as some armed guy somehow stopped them and made them walk towards the back of their property where a mass grave is being dug. This scene is one of the more memorable scenes in the film because of the show stealer militia guy played by Jesse Plemons. The scene has some genuine tension because you can't exactly read what is going on in the militia guy's head. He has a blank, almost affable expression throughout the entire scene. He comes across as a guy you'd be fine shooting the breeze with in line at the supermarket if it wasn't for what he does in this scene. As Joel, Lee, and Tony approach, Militia Guy shoots Tony's friend and kills him. Tony goes catatonic, and we get the meme.
Okay. What kind of American are you?
There's this pregnant pause because nobody knows what the fuck that even means. The militia guy clarifies and asks them where they're from. Joel, Jesse, and Lee tell him what states they're from, and the militia guy spares them. Tony, on the other hand, doesn't catch on and stupidly tells him that he's from Hong Kong and gets executed on the spot. My headcanon is that the militia guy shot him for being a fucking moron rather than him not being American. There's this idea that the militia guy is racist. Even the Wikipedia page says he's racist. But if you pay attention to what just happened right before you, you'd realize that he probably isn't racist. He's anti-immigrant. Joel is played by Wagner Moura, a Brazilian with an obvious accent. The militia guy spared the guy with a Brazilian accent when he said he's from Florida. If militia guy is racist, he's not very good at being racist. And if you look in the mass grave, you'll notice that there are corpses of all different kinds of people. Black, white, Puerto Rican, candy stripe. So yeah, militia guy is anti-immigrant. End of story. Old man Sammy swoops in with the truck and runs over the militia guy and his partner and saves the day, but is shot in the process. Instead of stopping to tend to his wounds, they put Sammy's fat old dying ass in the back seat where he looks at a forest fire like a sundowning old man, then he bleeds out and dies. I didn't mention this, but the movie takes the time to mention that Sammy was old and slow at least twice. I was looking at the time wondering when he was going to eat it because it was that predictable. So the gang stops at a WF outpost to pass off Sammy's body to the coroner. This is when the gang get the news that the president is about to surrender ahead of schedule and the WF are about to take Washington. They failed to get the story and Sammy died for nothing. We then get a scene that basically is only there to set up a really stupid character death. Lee talks to Jesse, who is now wearing a black shirt in the most unsubtle display of subtlety I have ever seen. Jesse explains that she feels alive when she's in the field and in danger. Right, sure, whatever, man. Lee cleans Sammy's blood from the back seat of the truck and she seems to be experiencing some kind of PTSD or shock or something as she freezes when she sees Joel staring at her. The gang go to DC even though they just accepted defeat the scene prior. Honestly, the last 20 minutes of the film are the most entertaining. We finally get to experience this civil war that was mentioned in the fucking distant lore of this movie. The gunfire is realistically loud and concussive, the destruction and chaos is kinetic, and the combat chatter is realistic. Too bad we still have to follow the boring press. Jesse turns into a psychotic maniac in the final act of the movie due to the movie wanting to set up a moment later. She starts throwing herself into dumbass positions in order to take pictures of the action. All the while, Lee is having a tismy meltdown where she becomes catatonic. She gets better though, watch. The WF and the press reach the front lawn of the White House and the president's motorcade seems to flee. But Lee sobers up and stops tisming long enough to smell that something is wrong and investigates the White House. Yes, the entrance to the White House is completely unguarded. And as we are going to find out later, the president is actually inside of there. Lucky for the gang, some WF soldiers wise up and follow them so they have a security escort. As the gang go deeper into Whiskey Hotel, it becomes apparent that something is amiss as the press secretary admits that the president is still there and wants to negotiate terms of surrender, but the WF soldiers want his head on a pike. Again, why do they hate the president so much? What exactly did he do? It isn't enough to say he was an authoritarian tyrant. Some would say the US and UK currently live under authoritarian regimes right now. Your simple word on the matter is not enough to get me to understand your point. The WF forces gun down the press secretary and engage what remains of the Secret Service. Jessie begins throwing herself into combat to get photos again, only this time the WF soldiers tell her to chill the fuck out. By this point, Lee's tisms have calmed down and she's basically back to normal and no longer a damsel in distress. In a stunningly stupid fucking moment, Jessie runs out into an open hallway to get a photo while the heavy gunner is reloading, meaning she has no cover fire to protect her from the Secret Service's gunfire. Lee leaps out and shoves Jessie to the floor, perpendicular to the wall they came from, meaning Jessie is in the middle of the floor still in the line of fire. You see, Lee needed to push Jessie in this very specific way so that we can have the following payoff. Jessie takes several pictures of Lee getting shot in the back and killed, as the plate carrier she wears does nothing to save her. Now, you see, it was a problem in Godzilla -1, but that was a small scratch on an immaculate film. This is the 7th fuck-up of this nature in this movie. Characters doing dumb shit for the sake of the plot. Just like Noriko in -1, Lee decides to push Jessie to the floor instead of just tackling her and bringing her with Lee across the hallway. Only this time, it's even dumber as there's this awkward moment where Lee is just standing over Jessie as if she just realized that what she did was dumb as fuck, but she knows it's too late. Jessie kind of ends up a karma Houdini in this film, downplayed however. Joel just grabs Jessie by the shoulder of her plate carrier. I don't know what this gesture is supposed to mean, but we are literal seconds away from the credits, so I'm not stopping here. Joel walks towards the Oval Office. The WF forces pull the president from under the desk as he begs for his life. Joel asks for a quote and the president says, "Please don't let them kill me." And Joel, with a suddenly vindictive tone, says, "That'll do." Again, why do you hate the president? Especially since it was established earlier in the movie that journalists are supposed to be objective and unbiased. Are you telling us journalists aren't really that objective and they have their biases? What is this movie even trying to fucking say at this point? Well, I can guess what it's trying to say, but you'll have to hold on for a little bit longer. Jesse takes a series of pictures of the WF soldiers executing the president and the movie ends. But I'm going to recreate the first frame of the credits. I'm serious. Look at this. Yes, this is really what the first frame of the credits looks like. No drop shadow, nothing to make the text easier to read, nothing. The credits have a shot of the WF soldiers posing over the president's body as the film develops. And that was Civil War. What a pathetic, cowardly movie. See, this movie apparently had the message of journalists are the real heroes, but this message is utterly fucked up because the journalists are also strangely ghoulish and sociopathic. They revel in the idea of going into combat to take pictures of injured, dying, and recently deceased people before their bodies even hit room temperature. The videographers the gang meet before the final act are practically chomping at the bit to get footage of the president begging for his life. Lee herself is a bit of a jackass. The first scene she's introduced to us, she's callously taking pictures of people that were just killed in a suicide bombing. There's also a montage of her recording and photographing several acts of violence across the world. She shits on Jesse for not reacting well to the sight of looters being beaten up and her being given the decision to kill them. She acts super hardcore and stoic, but the moment her mentor Sammy dies, now she suddenly has a problem with the violence. Once she's experienced a personal loss, the death and violence becomes too much for her. Guess what? All those deaths you photographed were personal losses to other people, you creature. All of these characters are low-key gremlins, especially Jesse. Then there's the fact that this movie is too afraid to piss off either side of the political aisle, so it ends up saying nothing. We get lore bait such as the bite of Antifa 87, but we get no elaboration as to what any of that even means. We don't know what policies got the country into this predicament. We don't know why Texas and California teamed up against the federal government when those two states hate each other in real life. We are never told who the Booga Boys in Hawaiian shirts are with, who the sniper and spotter are with, or who the anti-immigration militia guy is with. Not to mention that we have no clue what the fuck is going on outside of the northeastern United States. There's a small line about Florida trying to get the Carolinas to join their alliance, but that's it. This movie is the equivalent of Call of Duty World War II multiplayer, where they label the teams as my team versus enemy team, instead of growing some balls and specifically labeling sides. This movie needed to expand upon its world building with concrete information. In its attempt to not pick a side, it ends up not saying anything of substance in regards to commentary about the idea of a second American Civil War. You can tell an engaging political drama with realistic world building without coming across as a spineless cuck afraid of pissing off a certain side. An example of this is Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. I won't spoil anything, but the game gives you the information on what the president of the NUSA did, how she got there, and the current state of the country, lets you come to your own conclusion, then allows you to vocalize your opinion in-game through V. God, I can't wait to do a video on Cyberpunk 2077, dude. Anyways, I'm not spending any more time talking about this movie that is aggressively fading from my memory faster than an ice cream cone melts on a July afternoon. Time to head back to the Age of Extinction mines. I will see you guys next time.